May I now request the audience to kindly switch off your mobile phones or keep them in silent mode during the proceedings of the dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, washrooms for our guests are indicated in blue color. I would now like to orient you within the auditorium and cover the safety guidelines in case of any eventuality. This auditorium has 4 exits as displayed in red. In case of fire or any other emergency, all personnel seated in the first 3 rows are requested to depart the auditorium from the forward doors. Personnel in rows 4 to 10 are requested to depart from the left door at the rear. All the balance personnel are requested to depart from the center rear door. All media personnel in the balcony are to evacuate from the front entrance of the auditorium. A fire point has been established outside in the right foyer. In case of any medical emergency, an ambulance with qualified medical practitioners is also available. Thank you.
Sir, may I have your permission to commence the proceedings? Air Marshal Saju Balakrishnan, AVSM, VM, Commander-in-Chief, Andaman and Nicobar Command, Vice Admiral Suraj Berry, AVSM, NM, VSM, Commander-in-Chief, Strategic Forces Command, distinguished speakers, delegates from friendly IOR nations and service headquarters, officers from various other commands and military institutes joining us over video conferencing, and officers of the Andaman and Nicobar Command. A very good morning to all of you. I, Lieutenant Commander Anushri, along with my co-host, Lieutenant Commander Mohit, will be conducting the proceedings of the dialogue. On behalf of the entire command, I would like to warmly welcome you all to Emerald Isles for the Dweep Diksha Dialogue 2024. During the early hours of 26 December 2004, a tsunami of unprecedented magnitude set off by an underwater earthquake near the coast of Sumatra hit the coasts of IOR nations. The tsunami claimed over 230,000 lives, destroyed infrastructure, and displaced countless families. But what followed was a story of unparalleled spirit, determination, and grit, where the region collectively responded and recovered to its pre-tsunami status and beyond. It was also a trigger for IOR nations to be better prepared for such large-scale natural calamities unilaterally and through regional partnerships. To honor this spirit, the theme for this year's Dweep Diksha Dialogue has been chosen as Dweep Madad, meaning island assistance. The dialogue aims to recall events of the 2004 tsunami and examine prospects for the IOR. The dialogue will be conducted over 2 days and 5 sessions, wherein 16 eminent speakers and subject matter experts, along with 2 tsunami survivors, will share their wisdom and experiences with us. A question and discussion session has also been planned at the end of each session, which will be steered by the session moderator. The sequence of today's dialogue is as flashed on the screen. To commence with the proceedings of the dialogue, may I now request Rear Admiral Biplab Hota, VSM, Chief of Staff, Andaman and Nicobar Command, to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Air Marshal Saju Balakrishnan, Commander-in-Chief, Andaman and Nicobar Command, Vice Admiral Suraj Berry, Commander-in-Chief, Strategic Forces Command, the Ambassador from Indonesia, senior officers, esteemed guests, delegates from friendly foreign countries, friends from the media, all those who have logged in online, officers and personnel of ANC. Good morning to one and all. On behalf of Commander-in-Chief, it is my singular privilege to welcome you all to Dweep Diksha Dialogue 2024. The Andaman and Nicobar Command was raised in October 2001. It is the first joint armed forces command of India. Here, the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard components function as a unified force under the Commander-in-Chief. This integration has resulted in transforming the Andaman and Nicobar Command into a vital and credible military command. The Dweep Diksha Dialogue started in 2023. It aims to provide a forum to discuss the subjects of strategic importance, including national and regional imperatives. The inaugural dialogue was themed Strategic Importance of ANI. It saw participation of various subject matter experts whose presence and wisdom made the event a grand success. This year, the theme of dialogue is recalling the 2004 tsunami and prospects for IOR. It has been selected to commemorate the 20th anniversary of 2004 tsunami. It is dedicated to the resolve of HADR teams, armed forces, local administration, and most importantly, the people of IOR and particularly those in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. These personnel stood together to overcome the effects of the most devastating natural calamity of this century. Establishment of organizations such as IONS provide us a framework to discuss these issues and enhance regional partnership to overcome common challenges. You will be pleased to know that post-success of the inaugural seminar, Dweep Diksha Dialogue has grown in scale and subscription. This year, we have extremely eminent speakers and subject matter experts from various fields to share their wisdom. During the dialogue, tsunami survivors and brave officers who were tasked to execute their rescue mission will also share their experience. I am confident that the talk by the speakers will kindle a new perspective to HADR and enable us to respond better in the future. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to one and all, and I'm looking forward to a fruitful dialogue. With this, I hand over to the MC for further proceedings. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. The keynote address of a dialogue sets the tone and outline for the discussions to follow, and it is therefore imperative that a person of impeccable experience and wisdom does the honors. We are therefore fortunate and privileged that our Chief of Defence Staff, General Anil Chauhan, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, SM, and VSM, has sent us a pre-recorded keynote address. The General is the second Chief of Defence Staff and assumed office on 30th September 2022. With over 40 years of experience, the General's vision will be key in steering this dialogue.
CNC of Andaman and Nicobar Command, Air Marshal Raju Balakrishnan, distinguished speakers, guests and delegates from friendly foreign countries, officers and personnel of Andaman and Nicobar Command, and all those who have logged in online. A very good morning to all of you. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate all personnel of Andaman and Nicobar Command on completion of 24 years as the pioneer Joint Military Command of the nation. Having witnessed the first Dweep Diksha Dialogue last year with the theme Strategic Importance of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, I am actually honored to deliver the keynote address for the second Dweep Diksha Dialogue themed DWEEP MADAD, recalling the 2004 tsunami and prospects for the Indian Ocean region. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands hold significant geopolitical importance due to its strategic location astride the major shipping corridor. It is the gateway from east to the Indian Ocean region with immense economic potential and inherent diplomatic and regional influence. The islands are also a natural launch point for quick response during humanitarian and disaster relief situations. As part of our larger national strategy and Government of India's vision of security and growth for all in the region, called as SAGAR, we view ourselves as the preferred security provider towards enduring peace and prosperity in the region. Creating of the Andaman and Nicobar Command in October 2001 was a landmark event in the history of our armed forces. It was on this day that we truly embarked on the journey towards operational jointness. The integrated functioning of the four components, that's the Indian Army, the Indian Navy, Indian Air Force, and the Indian Coast Guard, has enhanced the military capabilities of Andaman and Nicobar Island. It has also bolstered our surveillance and accompanying military capabilities in the region. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the efforts of all the officers, personnel and families of Andaman and Nicobar Command in fostering the spirit of joint culture within the command. The experience of Andaman and Nicobar Command as an integrated command are serving as useful references towards development of the framework for integrated theatre commands. Apart from enhancing the overall military capabilities and outreach of the armed forces, the command is also a stellar example for effective civil-military fusion. Its role in maintaining a seamless connect with various response agencies has been instrumental in undertaking coordinated HADR operations, preventing illegal immigrants and flow of narcotics within the islands. It's also providing assistance to other friendly foreign countries in the Indian Ocean region. This region, unfortunately, is prone to vagaries of nature and has witnessed several cyclonic storms and earthquakes in the past, including the devastating tsunami of 2004. Effective response to such natural disaster warrants continuous monitoring and preparations. The 2004 tsunami was one of the most devastating natural disasters of this century that claimed over 230,000 lives across the Indian Ocean region. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands bore the brunt of the fury and many of our military stations were severely impacted. Let's all take a moment to reflect on that tragedy and pay homage to the dear ones that we lost on that fateful day. It may not be wrong to state that back in 2004, we were not so well prepared to address the challenges posed by events like tsunamis. However, it has taught us a number of lessons. It highlighted the necessity to be better prepared to detect, respond to natural calamities. It clearly brought out the importance of cooperative engagement at the national and international level to reduce losses of life and material. Post the tsunami, entire national resources were mobilized for the rehabilitation and disaster relief. The three services acted in unison towards providing the much needed succor. It's heartening to note that many of those key personnel who experienced the fury of tsunami firsthand, including suffering personal losses and those involved in relief and rehabilitation across the islands, are available here today to share their personal experiences. I am sure that those invaluable lessons will enrich the audience and provide key inputs toward HADR efforts in future. Learning from the experience of 2004 tsunami and other natural disasters, India has built a credible HADR response grid across the entire nation under the aegis of National Disaster Management Authority. The NDMA is well supported by all departments of the government, including the armed forces. Major disasters such as the tsunami also requires collaborative efforts by all Indian Ocean region nations. India's recent efforts to provide humanitarian aid and transshipment of stores to neighboring countries has provided a flip to such collective efforts, promoting interoperability and extending cooperation between littoral nations. With that as a background, I am extremely pleased to note that Andaman and Nicobar Command has chosen this important and relevant theme for the second annual Dweep Diksha dialogue. It's also heartening to know that bright minds from the regional nations would be ideating on extremely riveting topics during the course of the dialogue. I am confident that their collective wisdom would ignite curiosity and inspire you to explore and discuss disaster management in the Indian Ocean region in greater details. In conclusion, I wish the organizing team and all the delegates the very best for the conduct of the dialogue. The future holds exciting possibilities, and I have no doubt that the same dedication and determination that has brought us this far will ensure we achieve greater success together. Thank you and Jai Hind.
We sincerely thank the Chief of Defence Staff for taking out time from his busy schedule and sending us this address, which has given us the correct perspective. I am sure that interesting discussions will now ensue as we progress further. Post the 2004 tsunami and based on lessons learned from occurrence of the other natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes, India's HADR construct and response mechanism was formalized through the Disaster Management Act of 2005. This resulted in the creation of the National Disaster Management Agency, an apex body headed by the Prime Minister, to lay down and implement integrated disaster management policies. Today, we are fortunate to have amongst us Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, SM, VSM, and BAR, who is currently a member of the NDMA, to deliver the inaugural address. Through the 40 years of his illustrious career, Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain has tenanted various appointments, including commanding the Srinagar-based 15 Corps. Post-retirement from the Army, the General was appointed as Chancellor of the Central University of Kashmir and member of the National Disaster Management Authority of India. I would now like to invite Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain on stage to kindly deliver the inaugural address.
Good morning and Jai Hind to everyone present in the hall. Air Marshal Balakrishnan, Vice Admiral Suraj Berry, our heartiest compliments to the entire leadership and fraternity of the Andaman and Nicobar Command, all those present here, esteemed members of the audience. I wish to convey greetings also to the people of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. We also welcome all the international delegates who are here present from various countries in the Indian Ocean region. I am proud of the fact that I was a part of the working group which helped in the execution of the recommendations of the group of ministers, which included the setting up of headquarters Andaman and Nicobar Command in 2001. I was then the Colonel MS-9 at the MS branch, and I still remember issuing the initial directions for the staffing of headquarters Andaman and Nicobar Command. I'm also acutely conscious of the 20th anniversary of the Indian Ocean tsunami on the 26th of December 2024. And I want to start by condoling the untimely death of 1,300 innocents from these islands, 5,700 missing, presumed dead also. These were all our countrymen who died in the face of one of the worst natural calamities the nation ever faced. I also, while standing here, wish to salute the freedom fighters of our nation who braved the travails of Kalapani while under detention here. Yesterday I happened to visit the cellular jail once again, perhaps the 6th or the 7th time in my life, and it was always a moving experience. There is no better way to mark the anniversary of an unfortunate event such as the tsunami than through an exercise in professional expertise, something that the Headquarters Andaman and Nicobar Command does anyway. I can see that how appropriately the Andaman and Nicobar Command Headquarters has weaved together a program. I've been noticing it over the last 2 months as the drafts have been coming somehow to me too, and I've been watching it progressively evolve. A wonderful program comprising humanitarian assistance and disaster response, along with geopolitical and operational aspects, and I'm keenly looking forward to the interventions of an array of luminaries who are present in this hall, all great professionals. For us in the National Disaster Management Authority, of which I am a member, for us at the NDMA, and in INCOIS, which I hope you know the full form, the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services, Hyderabad, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary on the 26th of December too. And here in Headquarters Andaman Nicobar Command, the intent is quite clear. We must have a zero fatality disaster the next time if it ever has to happen. That's the whole intent of professionalizing disaster management in any nation. And that's what we have done in our nation. I consider myself singularly fortunate that I have a leg in each boat. The HADR one, through my being a member of the NDMA, and the geopolitical and the operational one. And perhaps I would have loved to stay on through the complete seminar, but then my organization happens to be headed by none other than the Honorable Prime Minister of India, who is the chairperson of the NDMA, and we have our annual review on the 24th of December, which is being taken by the Honorable Prime Minister, so I have to rush back. But not without highlighting those issues that you rarely hear of or talk about. The professionalization of HADR in India and its linkage with national security. Why India? The professionalization of HADR across the world and particularly across our region. So a word on national security and HADR. This is an intrinsic connect. There is an intrinsic connect between national security and disaster management, and this spreads through different levels and vistas. The realization comes with the application of mind. And anecdotally, I can tell you this, that although we have come miles since the tsunami, since the enactment of the Disaster Management Act of India, December 2005, which was just reviewed, if you saw, 7 days ago in the Parliament again. Despite all that, the level of professionalization achieved, or level of awareness perhaps achieved, still remains partially questionable. It surprised me when visiting various category establishments of the Indian Armed Forces, I find officers sometimes telling me, so why do we have to indulge ourselves in HADR, in disaster management at all? After all, under the Disaster Management Act of 2005, you found that the NDRF, the National Disaster Response Force, was raised. And when you asked people as to how many units are there in the NDRF, perhaps people are not aware. There are 16 units today, 16 units, to look after the entire nation, 16 units. And that is where I have to explain to people always, to tell them, you may professionalize disaster management by raising additional resources and units and things like that, but this responsibility will never go away from the Armed Forces of India. And the Armed Forces of India have always risen to it. It's only a question of us realizing it better and professionalizing our own knowledge. Officers who have served in an organization such as the Headquarters Andaman and Nicobar Command obviously stand to gain from the knowledge and experience. You are disaster ready at all times. That's what I am always aware of. You cannot divorce disaster management from national security. Let me give you a few statistics. We lost $165 billion to disasters between 2020 and 2023. That is 5.5% of the world total of $3 trillion. 85,000 lives were lost in India from a world total of 12 million, of 1.2 million. Mainly floods, cyclones, tsunami, earthquakes, and landslides. These were all responsible. Besides just the economic losses, the cascading effect on infrastructure is immense. If airports, shipports, power stations, tunnels, railway yards, all these things get affected, imagine the economic loss to the nation. Perhaps most people would be unaware of an organization called the CDRI, set up by none other than the orders of the chairperson, the NDMA, the Prime Minister of India, the Coalition of Disaster Risk Infrastructure. If you ask anyone today, in India, hardly anyone knows about what is CDRI, and there are almost 42 countries which have joined this coalition today, looking at how to make infrastructure that much disaster resilient. To give you a recall of what disasters can do to a nation, look no further than 4 examples that I recently gave in a seminar at Delhi, the wonderful Chanakya dialogues which the Indian Army had set up at the Manekshaw Center. I gave them 4 examples. The first was mostly concerning hybrid war. First was the drought in Somalia. Today, if you are having problems in the Red Sea, if you are having problems in the Gulf of Aden, and if Kenya, and we've got friends from Kenya sitting here, if Kenya is having a problem with Al-Shabaab as a terrorist group active there, it is primarily to the Somalian drought. The number of IDPs, internally displaced people who came out of that drought. Why go any further? Look at the Western Sahara drought. What happened in Western Sahara? The Boko Haram came out of that. Right? The migrations which happened from North Africa into Europe, many times the boat people in the Mediterranean Sea, were all related to the Western Sahara drought. The Bangladesh cyclone, Bhola, 1970. People have generally forgotten that well before Bangladesh was even created, 540,000 people died in that super cyclone. And subsequently, I think almost 130,000 people again died in the year 1991, just at the time of the Gulf War I, when another super cyclone hit Bangladesh. And all this affected Bangladesh's national security. The national security of a neighboring nation affects our national security. Look at the Pakistan floods, 2022-2023. If you would be aware, 2.6 million people have come out as internally displaced people from these floods. All living in camps, estimated that it will take $16 billion to resettle these people. And need I remind you that the last time you had such a problem, where you had in Pakistan internally displaced people living in camps, was in 1979, 80, 81, the beginning of the Afghan war. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. 3 million people came out on the western borders as IDPs. And that's where the seminaries were set up. That is where the Al-Qaeda was ultimately born. Everything comes from some aspect of disasters somewhere. So with climate change, we are all at risk. Extreme weather events, urban flooding, heat waves, forest fires, landslides, Gloughs, glacial lake outburst floods, cyclones. The issue is we may be prepared for the contingencies today of marginal disasters, but the really big ones are the ones which can change the landscape of national security completely. And we have to empower ourselves sufficiently, knowledge-wise to encounter these. Have you heard of the Chamoli disaster, which happened in 2021? When out of the blue, on a clear, bright day, an ice block of the size of 6 football fields suddenly fell off the Nanda Devi massif, came crashing down 8,000 feet, created a deluge of water. The air current which was produced by this cascade of ice coming down broke all the trees up to 3 kilometers on either side of the event where it happened. and it led to a massive debris flow. Sikkim. What happened on the 4th of October last year, 2023? Unfortunately, on the 7th of October, 3 days later, the Hamas war broke out. So as a result, you suddenly found everything went off the headlines. And no one remembers what happened to Sikkim. I was one of those who happened to visit Sikkim just after this happened. I came back horrified. I came back horrified to actually virtually report that militarily we have been deeply affected by the infrastructure. The formation of ours is divided virtually by a river. A whole huge amount of ammunition has gone, waste has been swept away. Lots and lots of things happen like that. Hardly known in the country. Kedarnath similarly. So if you just imagine if an earthquake flattens the areas in Arunachal, along with our defense infrastructure, do we have a plan to resume our functioning and building back better, which is one of the principles of disaster management? That we have to question ourselves. Do we in the armed forces have sufficient means to access potential destruction, to assess potential destruction by a disaster of these proportions? Do we have the capability professionally to assess what is the post-disaster needs requirement, the PDNA as such? This is all a part of the professional job, and that is why I say disaster management today is a subject for everyone, all of government. There are only two domains to my mind which demand all of government approach. First is war. In war, every department, no one can say the army has to fight the war, the navy, the coast guard or the air force has to fight the war. Every single department of the government has to fight war. I made this statement many times during the Silkyara tunnel rescue last year when people questioned me, and I said, all of government approach. Every single member of government is responsible for what is happening at the rescue site in the Silkyara tunnel. And that's exactly what happened. At the end of the day, it was almost everyone who joined in. So, what do I have to propose to the armed forces? One or two simple things. To bring home this whole domain of disaster management in a more professionalized way. Incorporate formally, perhaps, and we could consider it, of course it doesn't have to be executed immediately, a paragraph in our operational orders on climate, weather, and disaster management. That's something which is not difficult to do. Start to look towards wargaming, climate change, and its likely effects on the nature and scope of operations. No greater place to experiment this than the Headquarter Andaman and Nicobar Command. It will give us time to overcome our mindsets, and so let's also give ourselves a lead time to be able to enable this kind of a thing to be done. The Royal United Services Institution, the RUSI, has recently conducted for the first time a war game on climate change. The next time there is a tsunami, the nation will expect inquests, and I hope people from here will visit inquests on its 25th thousand fatalities. How did this happen? Professionalization of disaster management and early warning. Early warning today has virtually become a human right. You must remember that. And whatever technology can contribute to early warning would be too little. If I take a survey in this hall at the moment, how many of you have downloaded the Sachet app? I can see a hand there going up. Not many people are aware of what is the Sachet app. The Sachet app is a flagship achievement of the National Disaster Management Authority. We have spent 300 crores putting up this whole technology, and it's only in its phase 1, it's going to go into phase 2 very soon. Which essentially means if you have got the app with you, then wherever you are and you have enabled it and you've got your global positioning on, you will get a warning of any impending disaster in a geographical area where you are located. If you don't have the Sachet app, you will still get a warning, but that warning will come to you a little late. It will come through a queuing effect. And this is that queuing effect that we are trying to overcome in the NDMA today, where we hope that we should be able to send you a warning within 8 to 15 seconds of any event. In Biparjoy, we sent 32 million messages to the area where landfall was to occur. And we carried out evacuation, relocation of various people under the National Cyclone Risk Development Program, which has shelters, underground cabling, roads, etc. It's through this that we could achieve this. So a lot is happening in the world of disaster management, and the more the armed forces just remain aware of it, the better it would be for all of us. Because at the end of the day, there is no better organization than the armed forces of India. To bring forth when everything else is down, ultimately it is the armed forces which will rise to the occasion. I have a minute and a half left of my allotted time. So let me just make you aware of one or two other things. If you really want a start point from where to begin learning about disaster management, being aware of HADR and disaster management as such, don't look any further than the NDMA website, where you can access the Honorable Prime Minister's 10-point agenda. You will be amazed to see how this 10-point agenda covers every aspect of HADR, including gender sensitivity, including absorption of technology, including the use of social media, including early warning as a human right. Everything is included there. And it will really put you into the right kind of a line of thinking to look at this. Last of all, the NDMA alongside has two other organizations called the NDRF, which is 16 units strong, professional force, absolutely, formed on the basis of the Rashtra Rifles, the manner in which the Rashtra Rifles has been set up at the Indian Army. Exactly that. We have 36 SDMAs in the country, state disaster authorities, 750 district disaster management authorities. The whole thing goes down, cascading down to the lowest levels. Under the new act, which has just been passed 7 days ago, all municipal corporations, all municipal urban bodies will be required to set up a disaster management authority. This is in view of the fact that we are now having such a huge threat from urban floods. EOCs, Emergency Operations Centers, are being made mandatory, and the professionalization of disaster management is well on its way. Since I've run out of time, I would not want to go beyond, but it's been such a pleasure to come here and see this program, see this kind of an audience which is sitting here. The kind of people who have been invited, who have agreed to come here and speak, one just looking forward to this entire thing. Tsunami survivors, disaster survivors, and at the same time looking at the geopolitical and the geostrategic aspects of HADR. Thank you so much for the invitation to us, and thank you for this opportunity for speaking about my organization, which I hope you will learn much more about in due course of time. Thank you very much. Marshal Balakrishnan, thank you, man, very much for this time which you have allotted to us. We will always be very thankful for this to you and your organization. God bless. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for an extremely informative and comprehensive account of India's HADR construct and way ahead for the Indian Ocean region, which has set the tone for this dialogue. Moving ahead with the proceedings, I would like you to introduce the first session for the day, which is focused on recalling events of the 2004 tsunami and responses by various agencies, including the local administration, the armed forces, and most importantly, the people of the islands. To enable better understanding of the events of 2004, we will now play a video feature recounting the tsunami and its aftermath.
The Indian Ocean, a vast peaceful bridge across cultures and communities. But then, in 2004, just a day after Christmas, it unleashed a wave of terror. Triggered by a powerful undersea earthquake, the Boxing Day tsunami gave no warning. In just 8 hours, more than 200,000 lives were lost. India was among the hardest hit. More than 1,000 kilometers from the mainland, the 836 Andaman and Nicobar Islands suffered extensive losses. The island of Car Nicobar, one of the closest to the epicenter, bore the brunt. Entire villages were swept away, with thousands dead or missing. Its airstrip damaged, jetties mangled, and the single peripheral road connecting communities swept away. 37 Wing Air Force Station Car Nicobar lost 122 personnel, including over 50 children. Overcoming grief, its magnificent men and their flying machines took to the skies, saving over 400 lives.
सुनामी के एकदम बाद यूनिट के सभी पायलट अपने परिवार को पीछे छोड़कर यहाँ यूनिट पहुँच गए हैं। उनको मालूम नहीं है उनके परिवार का क्या हाल है, लेकिन रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशंस के लिए आधे घंटे के अंदर पहला हवाई जहाज एयरबॉर्न हो गया।
The tri-service response was immediate.
Commander-in-Chief Andaman Nicobar Command comes directly under Chairman Chiefs of Staff. So we were passing direct orders to the CNC Andaman and Nicobar Command. The command in turn was giving us a sit-rep of what was happening in the islands.
Warriors turned saviors. Within hours, they commenced the nation's largest airlift in peacetime, with Indian Naval Air Station Utkrosh at Port Blair designated as the logistics hub. Local warships sailed out immediately, while the Navy diverted its capital ships. An integrated relief command was established with Sincan as the operational commander. The 108 Mountain Brigade, based at Port Blair, deployed more than 1,000 personnel to remote islands to undertake relief, restore and rebuild operations. They set up relief camps, field hospitals and re-established communications. Far-flung areas were supported by air till the army opened up an abandoned British-era Central Road. Jetties were repaired, enabling sea lift of heavy equipment. The Air Force also deployed a special task force to operationalize the strategic airbase at Car Nicobar. They worked round the clock to ensure runway repairs, enabling relief aircraft landings. They also repaired support infrastructure, and to their credit, within 100 days of the tragedy, the fighters called finals. Operating from temporary camps, the relief force braved over 200 aftershocks throughout the year. Uncertainty, their constant companion. The Navy positioned warships with integral helicopters off each island. At Campbell Bay, the Coast Guard led the rescue effort. The armed forces also undertook large-scale evacuations of remote populations to Port Blair for much-needed aid. Support came from all quarters. The Tata Institute of Social Sciences, with a long history of assistance during disasters, deployed a team to remote islands in the Nicobar Group. India also extended a helping hand to neighboring countries, launching simultaneous rescue, relief and reconstruction missions. The memorial at Car Nicobar stands tribute to the lives we lost and our resolve to never again face such devastation unprepared. In 2005, the National Disaster Management Authority was established, marking a shift from reactionary to proactive disaster management. A year later, the National Disaster Response Force was raised. Since then, it has saved over 150,000 lives. In 2007, the Indian Tsunami Early Warning Center was established. An array of sensors monitors seismic activity around the clock. Advanced computer modeling enables timely issue of warnings. Thinking globally, in 2019, India's Prime Minister launched the International CDRI.
वैश्विक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर नेचुरल डिजास्टर्स का सामना कर सके, इसके लिए भारत कोएलिशन फॉर डिजास्टर रेजिस्टेंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की शुरुआत कर रहा है। मैं सभी मेंबर स्टेट्स को इससे जुड़ने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं।
International HADR cooperation also increased through multinational exercises and symposiums. Naval and Coast Guard platforms, by design, are well suited for providing rapid, large-scale support across oceans. Through mission-based deployments, under the vision of security and growth for all in the region, our ships serve as first responders across the Indian Ocean. The Indian Air Force heavy helicopters and transport aircraft enable rapid strategic airlift, while the Army has assets to overcome all obstacles. Recent armed forces innovations include adoption of specialized HADR bricks, portable hospitals, and the use of drones to enhance reconnaissance. In the recent past, all three services and the Coast Guard have answered the call. During the war on COVID, they repatriated thousands and transported critical supplies. During Cyclone Tauktae, they saved over 500 lives off Mumbai. In 2023, a field hospital was flown to Iskenderun, Turkey, after a devastating earthquake.
I'm really grateful to them because they're the first group, arrived in Iskenderun.
As global warming increases the frequency and intensity of natural disasters, the nation and armed forces remain committed to protect, to assist, and to help rebuild. Sankhe Shakti. Together, we are stronger. Jai Hind.
To begin the first session of this dialogue, we have a first-hand account of post-tsunami activities at the Andaman and Nicobar Islands by the then commanding officer of the Maratha Light Infantry Battalion based here, Major General S.S. Ducey, VSM. With over 4 decades of military service, the General's experience of handling crisis is well known. Unfortunately, the General is unable to attend the dialogue today and has therefore sent us a pre-recorded video of his experience, which will play it on the screen now.
Esteemed guests, my dear colleagues and friends, I sincerely regret my inability to attend the event in person because of certain unavoidable circumstances, while we had looked at this event with a lot of hope and aspiration. Now, very briefly, I'll share with you my experiences of Tsunami 2004, which happened 20 years back, as you all are aware. Looking at an event which happened 20 years back, I think it's proper to look at the context of the event when it happened. 4 things come to the mind. First, the geographical context. You all are aware that Port Blair lies about 1200 kilometers from Calcutta and Chennai. And the southernmost island, GNI, is rather much closer to Indonesia than mainland India. I'm highlighting these things because this had a major bearing on the movement of the rescue and relief material. The second issue which comes to the mind is the operational context. My unit had moved from J&K in the month of May 2004 after a long tenure in CI operations. Any infantry battalion coming to the islands, it's a cold start for them because we generally do not have experience of amphibious operations. But looking back, it's with a lot of pride I share with you that the unit had very seriously carried out the orientation training, recce of the area of responsibility. My unit was responsible for the southern group of islands, the Nicobar Islands. We had gone through the AMFEX, I think sometime in the month of November. This experience came very beneficial when the event had happened. We had carried out detailed reconnaissance and liaison with the people in the islands. Also an interesting point, when the AMFEX had happened, half my battalion had been tasked to participate in a similar exercise which used to happen on the Gujarat coast in western India. The third thing is, when tsunami had happened at that time, I was the officiating brigade commander, and with my family we were at Chidiya Tapu, the famous forest ivy there, and also later in the evening we had realized that the only pilot of the single aircraft that the civil administration had was also there. And the fourth thing is, we did not know at that time what tsunami is, but that's a sad comment because we have a vast coastline, we have island territories. One should have been more aware, more knowledgeable about tsunami and the kind of damage it does. On 26 December sometime, I think in the morning, 6:29, very serious earthquake happened, 9.3 or 9.4. We were really jolted, and it took some time for us to get oriented at the forest ivy. And since we did not know what tsunami is, all we noticed was a serious turbulence at sea. And in the area of Chidiya Tapu, we did not have the classical tsunami waves striking there. But one could fathom that something serious had happened which was causing this kind of activity. We heard a ruckus in the village which lies close to the forest ivy. Within minutes, a call came from the civil administration for the pilot to fall back to the islands. And my own battalion 2 IC, he also gave me a call, gave me a brief update of what happened. One thing which he mentioned was that the cracks had occurred at the airstrip, which raised a serious alarm. And also he mentioned that a lot of damage had occurred in the naval area in Port Blair. Immediately, since I was the officiating brigade commander, I passed the warning order through my 2IC for the brigade staff that the brigade should be ready for any eventuality and both the battalions in company and platoon task forces, they should be ready to mobilize by air, by sea, stroke, land, which came very handy because we came time to respond. And since there was a lot of churning, there's a lot of movement in the sea, we really had to take some risk to get ourselves out from the IB. We had to really rush in the army trucks through a lot of water. But these are the calculated risks which any good commander should take. And then whole of the command got into top gear to take the assessment primarily in Car Nicobar and GNI, what had happened. And another thing which had happened, which I learned later, the two companies, half the battalion, which had gone to participate in the exercise as I mentioned earlier, on 26th December in the evening, they were to be berthing at Port Blair. So mid-sea, headquarters ANC gave directions and they were directed to reach out to Car Nicobar straightaway for immediate rescue and relief effort. And I think it was the next day, the CNC called the brigade commander and me, and we were sent to Car Nicobar, take the assessment and start coordinating the relief operations. Very briefly, the deployment that we had for ourselves, which happened over the days, the brigade headquarters in Skelton was deployed at Car Nicobar. My own battalion headquarters with two companies were deployed there. We had the JCO-led detachments at Kamota Island and Kachal Island. GNI, Great Nicobar Island, I deputed my 2IC with one company, and we had about a company strength of Bihar TA there to coordinate the effort. After some time, one officer-led detachment was sent to Little Andaman to coordinate the effort. One company was retained at Birchganj military station because Port Blair was acting as a kind of a logistic node. So to coordinate that effort, to assist the command and the naval component handle those stores and dispatch as required to the affected areas. This was done by an officer who remained in Port Blair. Now now things have changed, but at that time the rescue, relief and rehabilitation were happening concurrently, and that is where I think the art of leadership, decision making, command, risk come into play. And what were we doing? We were carrying out a damage assessment on various islands because the communication had broken, the jetties had got damaged. We were mobilizing resources very carefully, very calculatedly, and also the optimization of the resources that we had mobilized. That is something you need to take care. We built on the hierarchy community, especially where our tribal friends were there. And also one area of focus was team building, creating a sense of harmony and synergy because a lot of additional resources, a lot of NGOs were moving in to the island. And it was a mission assignment. Once a mission has been completed by a platoon, by a company, we got on to the next job of stabilization. So if I were to look back, what was the concept? It was a common sense approach with empathy and commitment. For paucity of time, when I reflect on those days, very briefly if I were to share with you, the first thing is I don't think we were prepared for the event. I also do not recollect whether we had any disaster management scheme. If it was there in the higher echelons, at least at my level, at the level of the battalion, we did not know of any. There was in many sectors non-compliance of coastal zone regulations for which we all had to pay very severely. However, and I say that with a lot of pride, the response was very prompt and effective. And it was a whole of the nation getting into the act. And we had very positive response from the ministers, from the secretaries and other departmental heads who were regularly visiting us in the islands. That led to speedy build-up of resources. We also had the engineer task forces, communication task forces, some medical teams coming from the mainland. We had the NGOs joining up. They had to be dovetailed into the teams. And the overall, the civil-military liaison, I would say, was of a good order. Another point is that the local population, quite unlike the mainland, demonstrated a lot of patience and resilience. But the cultural, psychological, gender sensitivities, when we look back, I think we paid lesser attention, or we were less sensitive about it, or we did not know much about it. That is something for all of us to learn. There were certain oversights and failures. Simplest of the things, the IL-76 is another cargo aircraft would come loaded to Car Nicobar. Throughout our deployment, we could not get any forklifts. A very, very simple thing, I think, which is a failure. I used to dread as a commanding officer when these aircrafts fully loaded would come, and it was so exhausting for the troops. Some of them, started getting affected because of the dehydration. Since the jetties had got damaged, at the time we had proposed that if we could have some semblance of floating barges and smaller boats, so that when the heavier ships, the bigger ships brought the material, we could quickly transport those to the islanders. To me, I got a sense that the planning for long-term rehabilitation was a little tardy. Maybe I was not as well informed at that time, because it happened in December through January and better part of February we were deployed. As a commanding officer, closely associated with the local population, I was looking at their immediate rehabilitation. So what we did, I reached out to my ex-servicemen, my friends in the mainland. They mustered some resources, and with the help of the command, we got those resources and reached out to the tribals so that they could make shelters for themselves. Even the reconstruction of jetties and primary infrastructure for the islands, to my mind, took a lot of time, or that was the impression one gathered. There was no sense of psychological counseling. People had suffered, families had suffered, damages had happened, destruction had happened. That is something which I am sure the present setup, even on the mainland, would be taken care of. And the reach out to the protected tribes is something I do not know. But I think that with their own wisdom, possibly they took care of themselves. But there have been positive outcomes as well. We have the NDMA now, the NDRF, SDRF, NID, and they are doing a great job. And we are aware, and I continue to remain a keen student of disaster management. I've written dissertations on that, and soon there shall be a podcast on the subject. And we have the interstate coordination, we have tabletop exercises happening, rehearsals happening, which has significantly reduced the destruction and damage whenever disasters happen. The community awareness and participation is of a much higher order. And we are also aware that the rules and regulations compliance has improved, and we have a proper tsunami early warning system. So to end my quick brief, I'm happy that we are capitalizing on the past experiences. There is sharing of best practices. Sometime I think in the year 2005, both the COs, commanding officers of the infantry battalions, got opportunity. I went to Thailand to attend a workshop, and the other battalion commander, he went to Japan. And the country is investing a lot in the R&D, and that is how it should be. And we have synergy from all the components, from all the departments and ministries in disaster mitigation and management. And more importantly, across the table, we have a technology infusion and networking which is happening. So before I take leave, I sincerely pray for the souls whom we had lost in tsunami. When it happened, I had lost a lot of my friends. And a note of sincere thanks to the local population and local administration of the time. And my very, very sincere thanks to the Commander-in-Chief who gave me this opportunity to share some experiences very briefly, and also to Commodore Handu, Commander Sujit, and so many others behind the scene. Thank you so much and wish you all the very best. Jai Hind. Esteemed guests,
thank you, sir, for providing us with your valuable insights. Moving ahead, the panel of speakers for the first session include Air Commodore B.S. Krishnakumar, Kirti Chakra, and Commodore Benny Anthony, who were holding key appointments at Andaman and Nicobar Command during the tsunami. The session will be moderated by Sri Shivarur. May I now request the speakers and the moderator to kindly come on stage. The moderator for the session, Sri Shivarur, is a senior journalist and an anchor with the India Today group, an alumni of St. Stephen's College, New Delhi and Cardiff University, UK, and an icon in defense journalism for 20 years. Sri Shivarur is a recipient of several awards for conflict reporting in multiple countries. In 2004, he was one of the first mainland reporters to reach and report from the Andamans. He is the author of the national bestseller, India's Most Fearless. Many of his accounts have been televised, most recently being the blockbuster film Amran. I now hand over to Sri Shivarur to introduce the speakers and take the session forward.
Thank you very much and good morning to all of you. I would like to begin by thanking the Andaman and Nicobar Command for everything that it does. Thank you for your service. For me personally, I can tell you that the topic of today's inaugural session, recalling the tsunami in 2004, comes very naturally to me. And I'll begin by, with your permission, sir, just telling a little story before I introduce the both of you. In August this year, I got a call from Diglipur, which is, as those of you who serve and work here know, is in the northern part of this island. It was a friend of mine who happens to be a local journalist here. And he said, Shiv, are you planning to come in December? So I had no idea what he was talking about. I was like, why would I come in December? So he reminded me that it's 20 years. And in 2004, I landed in Port Blair on December the 29th. I remained here for the next 16 days between islands reporting on the tsunami. It was my first assignment as a defense reporter. I was 23 years old, and it was my first assignment. So when this friend from Diglipur, who also happens to be a journalist, asked me if I'm coming, I said, unlike the free spirit I was 20 years ago, being able to report from wherever I wanted to do, now I'm pretty much a slave to the newsroom, and I don't think I will be able to travel. 45 minutes after that phone call, I got a call from the Andaman and Nicobar Command asking me if I will be able to attend this seminar. So for me, I believe in relationships. I believe that all things are connected. And I also believe that anyone who travels to the Andamans, and I hear that many of the delegates who've coming here for the first time, you will have a lifelong connection with these islands. it's something that you will always feel, and I did feel it when I was invited for this. So, Marshal Balakrishnan, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great privilege and an honor to be here. In the 20 years since I reported from here on the tsunami disaster, one question that has always haunted me as a journalist, and when I tell you that most journalists haven't been to the Andamans, I mean that. Most people haven't even thought of coming here to report. There are, as you well know, not very many opportunities for the media to come here and report, unless it's something like the tsunami, which is sad. Those who do come from the mainland to report from the Andamans are mostly here to report on military exercises and things like that, but never for anything else. So I have always, in the last 20 years, encouraged my colleagues and friends to come here and experience the islands for themselves. But in the last 20 years, one thing that has always haunted me every single time following the assignment when I spent reporting here on the disaster, and I did manage to report from Car Nicobar as well, is what if this happened again? Every single year that has been a question. What if this happened again? And it's a question that anybody who saw this disaster up close firsthand would ask. It's something that was touched upon by the previous speakers as well. General Hasnain spoke about it in his inaugural address about how the biggest calamity of our time, natural calamity of our time, has made us obsessively work towards, if I can say, tsunami-proofing the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And what have we actually done to do that? General Ducey's video just now, I think, was a very sort of unapologetic and unsparing look at how there is still, even 20 years later, a great deal to be done. So I do want to say that recalling Tsunami 2004 20 years later is something of a paradox, because 20 years is an entire generation, and one would imagine that 20 years later, all that happened at that time, the problems that were there, the tardiness that he spoke about, the issues, all of those would have been fixed. But are there things that still need to be looked at? And one of the reasons why recalling Tsunami 2004 is so important from the perspective of those who were there to actually see it is because over time, as we've seen in the lives that we live, information tends to become diluted, it evaporates, we don't see very much of it. Even 20 years previously, it's hard to tell whether information was authentic or not. And that's why I think it is a unique honor and a unique privilege to hear from two officers, two veterans now, who not only lived and operated on these islands, but were part of that first response. Air Commodore B.S. Krishna Kumar Kirti Chakra. His bio is there on the screen, so I won't just repeat that, but and I will let him, of course, get into the incredible actions that he undertook once he was there. I did meet him briefly at Car Nicobar, but I don't think he would remember, because he was too busy saving hundreds of lives, literally hundreds of lives, with his helicopter. He's been someone who has operated in search and rescue mode across all kinds of domains, from sea level all the way up to Siachen. He's been responsible for the induction of some of the most advanced and future-looking, rotorcraft platforms into the military. So I welcome you, Air Commodore Krishna Kumar. Thank you very much for your service, sir, and thank you for being here. Also with us is Commodore Benny M. Anthony, who was in Port Blair at that time. He was the coup for maritime ops, a person who with his own eyes actually saw what happened on that morning of December the 26th. He was also one of the first responders from Port Blair, and it was through his eyes and through his directions in some ways that the first layer of what would turn out to be a gargantuan response effort would actually flow. He was on a plane the same day, got to Car Nicobar, and what followed over the next few days, between the 26th and the next 10-15 days,
is something that the islands will never ever forget. And he was right there to see it. So before I hand it over to Air Commodore Krishna Kumar and Commodore Anthony to tell us about what they saw, recalling what happened 20 years ago, I just want to say that the perspective that is offered non-academically by operations people who are in the mix, actually there, dividing time between, figuring out whether their families were okay and saving the lives of others, which is, in my view, there is no higher purpose than that. I think this offers an extremely unmissable and an unignorable perspective, and it is the only kind of perspective that will actually help us ensure that we can in some ways in the future tsunami-proof these islands. With that, I'd like to invite Air Commodore Krishna Kumar to give us his address.
Can you go to the first slide? And you go to the first slide. Thank you, Shiv, for that introduction. Air Marshal Saju Balakrishnan, the SINCAN, Commander SFC, Admiral Suraj Berry, senior member of the NDMA, well-known General Hasnain, senior delegates, senior officers who come from Air Headquarters, the ACS, T&H, Air Vice Marshal Vasisht. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by remembering all those whom we lost on that day of tsunami on 26th of December 2004 at Air Force Station Karnikobar in particular and in the region in general. Let me also place on record my sincere gratitude to all my colleagues who, despite having no resource at their disposal, ensured that we fought this battle, the lone battle, and came out victorious. Customarily, I must tell you how I cover this small little presentation. A brief on the area that is south of the 10-degree channel. Then we'll go on to the dynamics of tsunami. What are the immediate operations that we took up? And the subsequent actions and few lessons we learned, lest we forget. Ladies and gentlemen, as you all are aware, and covered by a few of the speakers earlier, the Karnikobar is a small little tiny island located south of where we are sitting today, far away from the mainland, approximately 1,450 kilometers from Chennai. This distance becomes significant not only from the logistic point of view, but also from the point of view of the advance warning that the mainland could have got after we were hit by tsunami at Karnikobar. Further, from where we are sitting, south, around close to about 300 kilometers, is that tiny little island of Karnikobar. And it's about 484 kilometers from Banda Aceh, north tip of Sumatra, which is the epicenter of the earthquake which triggered the tsunami. This is the Karnikobar Island. And we have a Air Force station, which is a strategically important Air Force base for us, located on the southeast coast of this island. Further, we have an airstrip, and the entire buildings, both official, that is technical buildings, and the domestic, were located between the runway and the coastline. That little triangle that you see there was where my house was. The Indian Air Force has had a helicopter unit with the medium lift helicopters of the Mi-8 class. And to support the flying operations, we have a radar unit as well. With all these, it is a very cohesive community. The climate, abundance of oxygen, plenty of tender coconut water. Just mind our own business, do our flying, which is good amount of effort, intra-island operations, casualty evacuation, search and rescue operation, which used to be quite frequent, special heliborne operations by day and night. And after a hectic week of flying, chill out in the beaches of Car Nicobar, doing snorkeling and walking around the beach. Life is really fantastic. I must tell this location of my house was an enemy for many of the nature lovers. It is just about 100 meters from the seashore. It is an independent house, and me, along with my wife, my daughter who was 12-year-old, and my son who was 6 years old, who happened to be sitting in the fourth row today, we're all staying in that island, in the house. And like I said, life is beautiful and peaceful. Now, before I go on to the describing what happened on that day, a bit about the anatomy of tsunami. For few of us who may not still be very aware of how a tsunami takes place, a sub-oceanic shift in the tectonic plate throws up water, massive amounts of water, in very limited time, triggering high levels of energy, which travels as waves with a speed of approximately 750 kilometers. While they travel in the sea, it does not create any wave. Thus, a ship which is cruising that time will not be able to detect any tsunami wave. But this wave, with a wavelength of with a frequency of about 5 minutes to even 1 hour, this high energy, as it comes toward the coastline and meets up with the rising coastline, start getting decelerated. So this energy, which has been a kinetic energy, now converts into potential energy, and it takes the forms of rolling waves, one over the other, and becomes gigantic waves, reducing the speed from 750 to approximately 150. And this hydropower, massive waves of about 60 to 80 feet height, coming at 150 kilometer speed, crashes onto the shore, taking away everything, buildings, trees, and not to talk of human lives. This is what exactly happened on that day. Just to get the records, historically, the tsunami, which was triggered by this earthquake, was recorded as the third most severe, powerful earthquakes recorded in the history, with 9.1. It was the day of Christmas, and the population of Car Nicobar, a homogeneous tribal community, 98% of them are Christians. So we all were invited to celebrate Christmas on the 25th. We went to the local church. We also took part in the Christmas celebrations, came back, and we said good night to each other and slept to get up a little late, the next day being a Sunday, on this pristine island. But roughly around 6:20, timing could be a little plus minus. Around that time, my wife woke me up saying that earthquake. I, having experienced earthquake several times while in serving in the north part of India, I was about to tell her to take it easy, but the amplitude and the severity increased in geometric proportion in no time. And we were shaken out of our wits by the rocking movement of the earth beneath us. The grumbling noise, we could feel the earth rubbing against, underneath each layer. It was a rolling motion. I also sprang out of the bed, went to the bedroom to see my children. My daughter had fallen off the bed. I told her to collect herself and run out of the house. I picked up my son, who was only 6-year-old that time. In the meantime, my wife ran to open the door. Unfortunately, the door was jammed because the frame was metallic frame, and because of the movement of the earthquake, the door was jammed. Fortunately for us, there was another wooden door on the rear side of the house. She managed to open it. I tried to come out of the house just to see how severe the earthquake is. When the earth, Mother Earth underneath you shakes, you feel so uncomfortable. I would come out, I was getting tossed from wall to wall. I just couldn't walk. It was an experience as though you're standing in the vestibule of a fast-running express train. It was a very desperate situation to come out of the house before the house collapsed. Luckily for us, the rear door opened and all of us came out of the house, and we stood at the rear side of the house, and the earth was still shaking very violently. We were all helpless. Every soul in the entire island was experiencing the same thing. Fortunately for us, maybe because of the earthquake resistant construction, buildings did not collapse. We stood there for about 3 minutes or so. The earthquake continued with the same intensity and severity. What appeared to us is more than 30 minutes or so. Slowly, the vibrations died down, and we all came in front of the house just to assess the situation. Everyone in the Air Force station was also doing the same thing. They came out of the house and exchanging what they went through this, short but very, very scary ordeal. Right then I realized that yes, I must go back to my unit and take a look at the assets, the prized assets of helicopters that we have. So I told my wife, you can make a cup of tea, I'll just go and change and then go to the unit to have a look at the helicopters. I entered the house. I was shocked to see everything in the house was thrown as though some drunken burglars had ransacked the entire house. I was worrying in my mind as to how to rebuild this, how to repair all this, notwithstanding what I was in for. I went to the bedroom, took the top of my night suit, now only in pajama and just a vest. I heard my wife screaming again. So I reassessed. I said, is it another earthquake? It can't happen so fast. But no, everything is safe, all stable. But something told me that those things are amiss. Don't waste time. The training that I gotten from my Sang School, National Defense Academy, and the Indian Air Force, I wasted no time. I ran out of the house, barefooted, came in front of the house. While this is happening, Flying Officer Vijay, who was sitting on the first floor of the officers' mess, saw the sea receding. It had gone back by about 1.5 kilometers, exposing the seashell. It is a fantastic sight for people who have not seen it. But that is only a prelude. Even my wife saw this, and after that, they saw the surge of the sea. First surge, again it went back, surge again, and by third or fourth time, it was about 4 feet or so surge. By the time I came out of the house, I saw churned up water, blackish in color, on a broad frontage. The entire ocean had entered my lawns. My wife had opened the gate of the house and we ran. The only thought came to our mind was that the island being a coral structure, probably because of the earthquake, the island had cracked and maybe we are all sinking because we are blissfully unaware of what tsunami was those days. So the only hope we thought was to run towards the center of the island and hope that maybe we could be saved. So she ran along with my son. I ran along with my daughter. Everyone was running towards the runway. One officer came in his small little Maruti, took my wife and son. My daughter and self continued running. Just before that, my wife looked back and saw a huge wave crashing over a house, and she was shocked. I told her, just don't look back, run. Everyone in the Air Force Station was running towards the runway, all in their night dresses, just been woken up. We ran. As I came across my mechanical transport section, what we call in Air Force, where all the vehicles are parked, I thought I must go pick up the vehicle. My official car was an ambassador car those days, and there will be many ladies and children who are struggling to run. So I took the car, came back. There were many who were, I could see death on their faces. They're so scared. Put them in groups, dropped them close to the runway, came back for the second round. That is the time when my station commander, Group Captain V.V. Bandyopadhyay, he crossed me, he stopped and said, KK, can you just get airborne and see what's happening? Events were happening so fast that even memory could not record. I reversed the car, I went to the tarmac where the helicopters are parked. We always have one helicopter which is ready for air, sea search and rescue role. Fortunately, the helicopter was intact despite the tarmac being badly damaged. I was barefooted in pajama and vest. Luckily for me, flying officer Vijay also came on the scene. There was a flight engineer, Das, and a flight gunner, Tripathi. I told them all to put on the May vest, borrowed a pair of slippers, and started a Mi-8, which normally takes about 2 minutes to start both the engines. But we started and took off in a record time at a minute and a half, thanks to the coordination by the crew. Now here I must say that in normal search and rescue operations, you are briefed what to look for and what to expect. But as I turned right towards the domestic area, what I saw was shocking. Waves as high about 50-60 feet were crashing over the domestic area and all the other buildings. I thought to myself, there's nothing we can do but just look for lives and save them. I saw a couple of people on the rooftop waving at me. I did an orbit to position myself, but by the time I completed the orbit, they were missing. They were washed off already by the wave. We looked for other survivors. There were few. Stuck in the balconies, few on the rooftops of some other buildings. We started winching them up. These waves had commenced roughly around 20-25 minutes after that. There were huge waves which swept over the buildings. This is the approach of the waves. They come in from the southeast direction and washed off the entire Air Force Station and from all the sides, entire island. The operations continued. I wanted to launch a second helicopter. I asked for the second helicopter. We had no communication. Since everything was washed off, the station Medicare center, that is the hospital, small little hospital, was completely washed off. The doctor was washed off. She never returned. The air traffic control building had collapsed in the earthquake. There was no communication. There was a makeshift air traffic control which was made. I transmitted to them to ask all people to run towards the runway and break the wall and run inwards towards the center of the island in a hope that we could be saved. In the meantime, I continued picking up people from 1 and 2 from the rooftops and balconies. We had an efficient group of engineers and gunners. And now the second helicopter was to be launched. I looked for the pilots. Unfortunately for me, both the qualified pilots, one, Flight Lieutenant Kadam, he went into water, never to return. Second, Nijar and his wife, along with all small little children, they also went into the water, but they came out, losing their children to the waves, and he was in no mental or physical condition to fly. So I had no other pilots to launch. Subsequently, Wing Commander Maheshwar, who was the Chief Operation Officer, he also had gone into water, but he, along with his wife and children, managed to escape, holding on to some door and gas cylinders, etc. And he came on the scene. Then I launched a second helicopter along with Flight Lieutenant. I'm giving these names because they need to be remembered. We continued the operations, lifting people. These are the machines that we had those days. All these photograph disclaimer that these are all post-tsunami. That time we had no time nor equipment to take any photographs or videography. We are taking stock of the situation. I flew for about 2 hours, 15 minutes in one helicopter. The only fuel available was on board both these helicopters and one Bowser standing. Rest of the fuel in the storage was contaminated already. So we had to rationalize how much of flying effort that we need to put in, because we knew that rest of the islands also would have been affected and there are no other resources available with us. Roughly around 8 o'clock, the Air Force component commander came overhead with the Dornier. He was assessing the damage to all the islands. There's a damaged ATC which I was talking about, and there's a makeshift ATC from where they were operating. There's operation of the winch operations, but this is of a different exercise and not of the tsunami. Then I noticed a radar ramp. If you can see, there's a radar transmitter, and the ramp had about 300 people. They're stuck on top. This is a water level, just an animation because we don't have the photograph of that time. And this radar ramp was about to collapse with 300 people on top of that. We would have lost all of them. So I started winching them up from there. The limitation of a winch in the Mi-17 is one at a time. But we had to throw the rule book out of the window, and we started operations of pinching them up in 2s and 3s and put them all onto the runway. We had operated and rescued more than 300 people. I was fully exhausted, as all my colleagues. We had no drop of water to drink. We switched over to the second helicopter and flew for about 5 hours, 15 minutes in all. By the time I came down, what happened on the ground was that the station commander himself had gone into water. He came back after fighting the waves, and he was seen in torn kurta pajamas. Probably you would have seen those visuals on the TV sometime. So during this time, in his absence, I had the additional task of, coordinating the entire thing of the Air Force Base. And my wife was the senior most lady that time, and he had to pacify, console the people with no medical facilities, because there are a lot of people who had gone into water, fought, came out, they lost their near dear ones in all kind of combinations. We have Miss Meghna sitting here who will be talking to us later, who herself has lost her parents. So after 5 hours, 15 minutes of flying, I came back. We assessed the situation. Everything in the Air Force Station was completely destroyed. We again got airborne to see what was happening to the rest of the island, and we found the entire island story was no different. With whatever little resources that we had, we mustered all that and tried to help each other. There was a ground party who was launched to look for survivors in the water, because after some day the water started receding. In that knee-deep water level, they look for bodies and any survivors. We started recovering bodies because we started getting, unfortunately, those who gone to the water never came back. By afternoon, about 3 o'clock, the AN-32 from Tambaram Air Force Station had come in. Air Force reacted with such speed that within flying time from mainland to Karnikobar is around 3 hours by an AN-32. But in a record time, the Air Force launched these aeroplanes. The first communication which reached the mainland probably was our HF set, that is the high frequency set on board the Mi-8, which we used to tell the Chennai ATC that Air Force Station Car Nicobar has been completely washed off. Please inform Air Headquarters. That must have been the only and the first communication that reached the mainland. Now, if you see the distance from the mainland, if we had known of tsunami that time, probably we would not have lost lives in the mainland because we had about 1.5 hours to 2 hours to react on the mainland. This operation by N32 continued through the night. The runway was damaged badly. 1/3 of the runway was completely damaged. They landed on a broken runway, operating throughout the night with makeshift night landing facilities. Unfortunately, these are the operation continued in full swing throughout the night. And on day 2, the IL-76, the Gajraj of the Indian Air Force, came carrying out mass evacuation in the order of casualties, those who lost their near dear ones, and the rest of the population, to Port Blair and to mainland. We continued operations for the next 10 days. The days were quite bad because we had nothing. Of course, Andaman Nicobar Command, with whatever resources that they had, they pressed in all, like we already heard the other speakers saying, they pressed in all, whatever they could. But initial few days of survival was definitely extremely difficult for all of us. But when you look back, yes, God had given us a second life. And it was our duty to ensure that each and every life that we could save could have been saved, could be saved. And I hope we performed, all of us collectively performed that duty which was assigned to us. Now, after this first day, second day, everyone was evacuated from the Air Force Station. But a handful of us stayed back, and I had the duty and responsibility to train the incoming pilots on island operations. We operated all the islands, Kardeep, Kachal, and Nankauri, and all the other islands. And every island had the same stories to tell. When you approach the helipad itself, you could get that, decomposed body smell. Unfortunately, entire island. It was a very, very grim sight and a very sad experience. A few more pictures now. The picture of the Air Force Station before and after the tsunami. They'll tell us how devastating it was. Few other pictures, some have already been shown in the movie. Damaged roads. This is the Medicare center, nothing left of it, including the doctor. Our air warriors living in area. Even the buildings which is standing, the water had gone through and through, taking every life which was inside. This is the officers' mess. Even gods were not spared. You see me standing on the plinth of my house, and it gives me goosebumps even now when I think that I was sleeping here along with my wife and children just barely 20 minutes before the tsunami occurred. This was what was left of my house. This was my prized possession, the car. Incidentally, I was quite worried after the earthquake, when I opened my garage, I saw there was my daughter's cycle had fallen out of the car and just crashed the car. So I was very, very concerned. But look at what happened after that. We had a makeshift to open a mess. Wise man said, the only mistake in life is the lesson not learned. So with this experience of having gone through tsunami and done the rescue operations, and my indoctrination in the Indian Air Force, here are a few lessons, sir. Operation preparedness, we talk of it many times, but we must definitely introspect and see how well we are operationally prepared to take on natural disasters. The disasters with warning are these days cyclone, all been covered by General Hasnain. These days we are so prepared that we have almost nil casualties in all these cyclones which keep happening. Floods again are anticipatory in nature, except for flash floods. Crew training for whether it is ship, aircraft, or the army is extremely important, because when we are caught unaware, there is no time to train each other that time. Whatever you're trained comes out naturally. So it is extremely important to have realistic training to take on natural disasters. Of course, we have to ensure availability of aircraft, ships, and other role equipment all the time. Coordinated effort with the relevant agencies is extremely important, as very aware, because you can't be operating in isolation. Without warning, with all this modern technology, we still don't have a warning system for earthquake. And tsunamis are triggered only by earthquake, except for the high tidal waves, which comes during maybe cyclone, etc. Otherwise, earthquakes only trigger tsunami. So if you can have some kind of warning for earthquake, which in some time I don't know whether it's possible. Tsunamis are highly predictable. Whenever there's an earthquake of more than 4.5 to 5 on the Richter scale, it will trigger a tsunami in different severities. So we can be much prepared. They have these systems which are already deployed in the open seas, which will sense the travel of the shock waves and will give us the warning. We need to be aware without being hysterical about it. If we have to be hit by an earthquake at this time, the very thought of it is very disturbing. But without being hysterical about it, one needs to be prepared. If you've been to Japan, every 5 minutes there is a communication on the TV which comes, what to do in case of an earthquake. It is very unsettling and disturbing. But one needs to get used to it, because that is the reality. And if you're going to be faced with an earthquake, you should know, your drill should be very clear, and you should be able to come out safe. That is very important. Communication is extremely important. That day we had no communication at all. And the only saving grace was the HF communication that we could establish from the onboard the MIS-8 to the mainland. And of course, coordinate with all the agencies. Operate within the standard operating procedures. There will be definitely, you will be stretched, because there will be time. I had to land the Mi-8 in a small little place, which is even not fit to put down a small little cheetah helicopter, but it had to be done. But you do it diligently, and with the coordination of the crew, then you can be safe. Because it's pointless losing more lives to save some lives. So ladies and gentlemen, with this I finish the episode of an experience that I had as a commanding officer and as a survivor on 26th of December in 2004. I hope I've been able to put across to you what is the kind of, how severe the entire episode was. And when faced with a challenge thrown up to you by nature, you're fairly helpless. But if you're well trained, well aware, then you can save yourself and save the lives around you. Thank you, and Jai Hind.
Commodore Benny Anthony, for your instructions.
Commander-in-Chief, Andaman and Nicobar Command, Commander-in-Chief, SFC, Ambassador, senior officers, distinguished guests from abroad, and the panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I've already been introduced, though he says I was everything. I was only the coup maritime ops, and there were many layers above me who were also taking stock of the situation and organizing. But since I was at a key position where we had to deploy naval assets, and we also had to look at the population in various islands where we operate. I was actually in the midst of it. To start with, in fact, Commodore Krishna Kumar has covered some part of what I would have spoken, so I'll just rush through that at a later stage. We had the earthquake early morning. We were also shaken up out of our beds. We were quite high up. I used to stay just next to the ANC mess. It was a fairly new building, but it was again swaying like a ship in Sea State 5. And that's the time when my family too had come for a vacation. It was Christmas, and we were planning to go to Ross Island, and we had got up early morning, and this whole thing unfolded. So since you're ready, I immediately proceed. The CSO Ops, he also used to stay in the same building. He was also a bachelor. So I immediately rushed to the headquarters, and this was only the earthquake. So we were trying to send out signals to all the units across to report damages and estimates, etc. And there was, at that point, there was no inkling of this tsunami. Though I have read about a tsunami in some James Morris book somewhere in New Zealand, and you have read about the navigation volume gives a very small passage on the tsunami, but that is not really what you see or what you expect when this earthquake happens. And while I was at the headquarters, we could see, you have a good view from top, since I had gone to the Comsen on top, the entire harbor. The first wave came in, and we had MV Akbar and two LCUs which were anchored in tandem nearby. From Chatham onwards, every ship, boat were pulled off from their anchors, everything, and were taken towards Chauldari, Viper Island. And then, after a minute or two, they were then pushed the other way as the water drained out of the harbor when the wave went down. And this continued. By the second wave, I drove down to the jetty. Water was already over the wharf. Ships, Cheetah and Kumbir were there along with some other LCUs. So they were manning the ropes. By then they had also got. I would say we were very lucky that it never rose above a certain level. Otherwise we would have had ships probably capsizing or coming and sitting on top of the jetty. And this continued maybe for the next hour and a half. It was not a one wave and out. It just, as I think he showed in his very nice diagram, it is a continuous set of waves. As it reaches the shelving coast, it keeps coming in. And when it comes into narrow channels like our harbor, it becomes like a bow tide and just slams in. Operational ships were ordered immediately. Most of it was all verbal. Start engines, use them to reduce strain on the ropes, keep away from the jetty. Many smaller vessels which went in and grounded on that side of the harbor and again at this end of the harbor towards Chatham. In fact, that was quite less compared to what happened where the direct water hit the civil jetties and the dry docks. I just take you through some of these: immediate assessment, earthquake and tsunami. I'll talk a bit about it because it affected the navigational aspects of the rescue and relief, role of survey ships and maritime operations for evacuation in brief. So this was the civil harbor and the jetties next to it. We had extensive damage there. That was Steel, that 100 packs ship which had turned turtle. And this was the dry dock. And the cassoon is meant to keep water out, but the entire water had come in and pushed the cassoon out. And we had a water barge which was also inside the dry dock, pushed out, and it had sat on the cassoon. I think subsequently, we had, as everybody said, we are so far away from the mainland, we had to use our own resources, our own capabilities, whatever bit of tugs, ships we had, etc., and also whatever facilities we had in the NSRY and the civil docks, etc., to get ships to be activated. In fact, the steel was parbuckled in a modified parbuckled manner and got upright and taken out maybe in a month or two by the own staff at the civil side. After the waves subsided, the task of securing the vessels at anchorage, assessing damages at other jetties on the islands became the top priority. The extensive damage in Car Nicobar was reported to, through aircraft communications first. In fact, the report we got was Car Nic is sinking. I mean, that was what the civil aircraft passed on the message to us. I mean, that is the first information we got from Car Nic. So we decided to proceed then directly to Car Nic to make an assessment, and you saw what was the state there. We went in a Dornier, the CNC himself, staff and self flew in that afternoon itself. In fact, we had already got a report from the government that the Prime Minister, etc., would be coming into land in Car Nic the next day. The situation in Car Nic was grim. You already heard I shall not elaborate on that. We had a look at what were our resources at that point of time. And the big silver lining was Gadial returning from an Amphex operations off the west coast, and he had crossed Dondra Head and was heading this way. So one of the aim was to go to Car Nic and try and identify a point where he could land troops. We had already told him he is to proceed to Car Nic, land troops and equipment there so that they could start with some people available. The jetty there was damaged. You saw pictures. Some tower also had fallen over it. We went to the southeast side. That was the only location where we could walk down from the from the airport, and went and had a look. But it was, when you look at it in hindsight, it was good that we did not try to land anywhere there. We came around, and he came and anchored off the jetty and got in all the troops through the jetty. And of course, the air base was about 10 kilometers or so on the far end from the jetty. Ships from the mainland, including Rajput, were dispatched immediately, but that would take 2 days. Every operational ship was made ready with whatever provisions we could gather and relief materials to proceed for relief and evacuation of injured people from the islands. The entire ops post-tsunami was based on the, quakes and the effect of the tsunami. Geologically, there was subsidence, liquefaction below, landslides in some locations. Navigationally, if you can understand, the datum on which the entire charts, everything is made, has shifted. It shifted in a matter of minutes. So add to that, we do, the LCUs, the LSTs, everybody goes and go to different beaches, find new landing points, we do surveys, make out transits, etc. Over many years, that entire navigational data had become absolutely useless because the ground beneath had changed. So and in addition, if you look at structures, there were structures, mangled, iron structures, there were debris of concrete structures which had fallen off the jetty around the areas, buildings fallen off onto the... So, Kachal is a prime example. Kachal had a jetty which was absolutely across the flow of this. There's no sign of that jetty, whether at the root or the pillars or nothing. Everything was washed off. Where to? we couldn't even, gather. Sunken boats, pontoons. So if you see, this is, there are boats which were lifted and all on the beach. Many, it's not one, there were many all along the islands. These were the kind of structures underneath, broken. I remember on Kachal there was, I think the army team which was there had got the local jeep, overturned jeep, and repaired it so that they could do some transportation internally. And also emotionally, evacuation of people who were suddenly left without any administration, no security, no health care, basic necessities, water. You see, when the tsunami came in, it filled every single area, and every well, every water source was contaminated. So it was a huge task to just get water, find out sources of water at each of the islands, and there are also, a lot of doomsday predictions. The islands will sink. It's, as it happens in these kind of things. So communication and reassurance was also part of, very important part of the first stage. I've taken the liberty to take some information and pictures from a detailed study which was done in 2006 by Javed Malik, CVR Murthy, and DS Rai. I just wanted to mention it so that I give due credit. This is available on the net, and it gives a good scientific study with pictures and information, and as well as location by location effects, changes, etc. Just to read out a short passage. First, there was the subsidence of the eastern coast of the area stretching over South Andaman Islands and all the Nicobar Islands by about 1.2 meters along Car Nicobar and Andaman Islands, and by about 3 meters along the southern tip of Great Nicobar Island. Secondly, the subsidence did not occur across all places at the same time or in the same. It was a gradual occurrence because the rupture propagated northwards slowly, and immediate flooding after shaking at many locations was because of this co-seismic subsidence. Third, uplifting of the North and Middle Andaman Islands occurred up to a maximum of about 3 meters at the northern tip, and relative uplift along the western coast of the islands also happened. But since the angle of tilt from the area was about 25 to 35 kilometers, there are a lot of blessings in this. You look at it, the actual civil structures hardly had a tilt of about an mm or two. So it did not really affect the structural stability of whatever structures were left standing. To give an example, the lighthouse at Indira Point, there was no prominent tilt, but there was definitely, because of this displacement, which I will explain to you. You can see that actually the first quake started on 17th of November. And it went on till 12th of January. So this 17th November and onwards, quakes may not have been recorded. They have been minor. They have been, not really taken due notice of. And of course, it is not an exact science. Everybody is learning as they go along and making new models and new findings every time we have a new occurrence. So you could see the Indian plate and the Burmese plate. And what actually happened was the Indian plate, the Indian plate actually went under the Burmese plate. So you have that's what the tilt from the west going up and the east going down. And the southern end actually, so if you see this is how it finally happened. So you had Diglipur about 3 meters up, Indira Point about 3 meters down, Nankauri, we had the jetty and water almost level. And another blessing, the fulcrum of this whole thing happened somewhere around the Port Blair area. So we were were not really affected navigationally to that extent. If it was somewhere else and we had gone down by a meter or two, it would have been, very catastrophic as far as deployment of resources and organizing various stuff. So, if effect of the tectonic shift I already mentioned, and as I told earlier, because of this datum and this shift, we had to start anew, making new landing points, beaches, etc., while you're still figuring out what is happening at each of the places. Coupled with large-scale uprooting of trees and debris falling, navigating into any harbor or close ashore was a nightmare. All the young commanding officers, if they are here, or the navigators would quite understand. I'll quickly run through the next one, and you understand, I said 3 meters, or at the tips, maybe 1.5 in Nankaveri. But if you understand, when you have a 1 meter difference, you would lose almost 100 to 200 meters of this shelving coast, So if you have 1 meter down, you would have water coming up, and you would have the shoreline covered over, another 100 meters. So boats, other stuff would have to land, 100 meters away, and people would have to wade up or down. That's what happened in most of the islands. And to remind you, there used to be crocodiles, I remember, sighted off Hut Bay when we were recovering people. So that was Indira Point, 3 meters down, it was already out in the water. You can see how much of the coast was taken over. These were all coast, but this 1 or 2 meters of subsidence. You can see that's trinket below. The shaded area below was what was actually land before it was taken over by the sea. Just to give a, this is MESIB, I think, at Karnik, which was, right on the coast. It used to be 100 meters inland. And that is the debris and devastation, which is, gravel, etc., taken from the sea and deposited inland. This was extensively spoken about, but as you see, like a ripple, when you drop a stone, the earthquake is, the quake or wherever the point of actual contact is something similar, and it generates a set of ripples, not over the water, but through the water, and it keeps coming in waves till it dies down. As you see, I just put that analogy to make you understand how it does happen, and over a period of time it dampens and dissipates. And it is also important to understand, and for future, that every earthquake does not necessarily generate a tsunami. One may be strength, one may be the way it happens, one may be how the plates meet, that you may have an earthquake, but it might not generate that energy or force into the water to go out for a tsunami. But I suppose every time, recently we had in New Zealand, they have to generate a tsunami warning and wait, and then, as by time and space, you then say, okay, the warning is over because it didn't happen. But every time it happens, you have to be ready for a tsunami coming in. Example, if you take a divers analogy, you see in the Olympics, there are some divers who will go in, there will be barely any water which comes out, and there will be some who would splash a whole lot of water. So it's something like that. I mean, it need not be that every time you will have a tsunami. And these waves, when they come in and hit, like when it comes into harbors, it comes in, it's like you have this whole amount of water coming in through a funnel into a harbor, and it just creates havoc, rises the level. It's not only rise in the level, after maybe 2 minutes, it takes out the entire water and maybe a little more, and creates, takes out everything which has come in. I remember Mini Bay, Bamboo Flats, etc., houses where the doors are closed, everything, water's come in and taken out, including the door and the entire belongings out into the sea. If you look at the, these plates interaction which I talked about earlier, it is, they say 200 years, but it could definitely happen in 2 years or maybe 2 months. It is not, there are no exact sciences to calculate as to when it would happen and when it would not. And what would be the pressures which each of these plates are being affected by other plates and other geological factors going on around the world. Going on to the next, the survey ships were deployed immediately. We had 1 and then 2 and finally 3 ships. And they came in a week later. I think by then the subsidence and everything had settled down. And they had to chart the waters into each harbor and establish new navigational passages, which was a long drawn out exercise, but they continued day and night. And over the next few weeks, harbor by harbor, they had charted out new datum passages and new charts. Their aid was crucial in establishing logistic supply chains, movement of personnel across the islands over the next few weeks. In fact, the civil passenger ferries, etc., which used to then not come alongside, could then move on alongside with a certain degree of navigational safety. That eased a lot of burden on the naval LSTs and LCUs, which were doing, the up and down, come here, load up at night, sail out, proceed to island by island. There was a large requirement of diving to inspect jetties, facilities near the water, and also help in salvaging what we could from the water. And we had been, just as an aside, we had many aspiring strong swimmers, aspiring divers who came on, and that was the director of shipping, I think, who was involved with the Teal rescue at that time, Captain James. These were other makeshift divers whom we had to employ to at various jetties to get things going. Coming to maritime operations, as I told you, INS Gadial had just crossed Dondra Head. The army team on board returning after the amphibious exercises. So she immediately went to Car Nicobar, landed the army personnel and the commander to provide assistance. There was severe shortage of manpower, especially the Navy. The army, there's manpower. And frankly, without any malice, the local administration in most areas had collapsed. It's not I'm not saying it in any bad way, because everybody in the local administration, in any disaster, you should understand that they stay home and go to work, and their families too are there with them, and they are all affected. So not asking them, they wouldn't report to office. So there was that was a major issue all across. In fact, I remember we had pulled out one lieutenant from the already short-staffed LSTs and LCUs, were 3, and they were sent with a SATCOM and a brief to do whatever you can and report with the best of your abilities and sent to various islands. The army, of course, sent their own teams to various islands, so we had a network of people who could report back and requirements, etc., so that we could try and load up either at Utkrosh. Utkrosh was also a big hub of, material coming in and then being transported to various islands by helicopters, by ships, etc. It was, if you come, it was like a huge logistic exercise by Utkrosh, by ships here. Karnik, of course, a lot of IL-76, we would come directly to Karnik and land and load stores, and we had stores all along the runway on either side of Karnik. So it was a humongous exercise to get. So we had teams in every island, Hut Bay, Nankaveri, there, who was looking at Kachal, we had just to look after the basic administration and just to get stores to come in, arrange and to send it out to the people below. And in a unique move, within I think a week or two, the Commander-in-Chief was made in charge of the administration. And all civil, Chief of Staff was then doing the CMC's job, and the Chief Secretary and various other departments, everybody used to have meetings here, and they would report to the CNC, because it was felt that at that time the requirement was very, very drastic to have some organization to get through aid and evacuate people and manage the entire thing. And as I told earlier, the civil administration did have issues of people to large number of people who are not directly affected. We have a lot of people who are maybe in living, who are, bachelors, who are this, etc. And you have your maybe accommodation a little away from this thing. And you saw how Karnik reacted. You saw even with families in turmoil, they still took off and, carried out. Similarly, so you have people to carry out exercises, and you have a backup source of, administration of food, logistics, etc. So you don't have to worry about those kind of thing, unlike, the civil counterpart. There were large-scale evacuations from Hut Bay, Campbell Bay, Nankawari, and other islands like Chaura. Chaura, there was no water. We had to evacuate everybody from there. Kachal, people to ostensibly safer areas in Port Blair. Many survivors were directly airlifted back to mainland because we had a large population. One of the indigenous population, we had a large population of settlers who were also contractors, workers, etc. Beginning and world will end, etc., etc. A lot of these was going on. The LSTs and the LCUs were our saviors, I would say. Maga brought in a Seeking 42 Charlie, which operated from Gadial and was of immense help in airlifting people from remote areas. Rajput came initially, and Sharab joined in later, and of course locally we had Kumbir and Cheetah and the LCUs. And I must make a special mention here that the young commanding officers really went into harm's way to land stores, evacuate people, and entered harbors. As I told you, you have no chart. And when you're telling them to go, you're, literally telling them to go with your eyes open, that's it. And they beached at various uncharted locations just by means of radar, hand-laden line, lookouts, and a hope and a prayer. I mean, they didn't let us down. They did it with courage and conviction that the job had to be done. And in fact, in many cases, they were really the first responders in most islands and of immense help in the whole relief, evacuation and reconstruction relief phase. The immediate rescue and relief operations continued with more ships coming in from the mainland, airlifts mostly directly, as I told you. And so this I was just trying to show how the wave comes up, As to as to lessons learned, I think he has, Krishna Kumar has said very correctly and elaborated on all those various lessons, and that's across the board. All disasters give you a whole lot of lessons. We have to assimilate it and include it in our next set of the work on our SOPs, etc. Just as a slight aside, since Shiv is here, We had a journalist, when you talk of embedded journalists on ships, etc. We had an embedded journalist on Rajput when he came in. So he came in, Rajput went various places, so he was off Campbell Bay, and the journalist said, let me go across, and he was winched into some place. And then he took some photographs, etc. We came back, and next thing, Rajput had to face a lot of flack, because by the time he reached back, this was already on national TV, and this was, tribal area, and we are not supposed to take photographs, etc., etc., etc. So when you have a journalist embedded, you have to be careful. Because they always go for that, man bites dog scenario. I think I would like to end with another small joke of, these pre-disaster management times. I remember when we were in Staff College back in 98, there was the local civil administration had come to give a talk on disaster management, and and that time it was mostly cyclones. So he said, the cyclone comes up on the west coast, and everybody east coast, and everybody knows how it comes. So it come in from Chennai. So if I am at Chennai, I would be praying that it would turn a little bit and go off towards Andhra. By the time it, once the cyclone develops, that is his prayer. And then I said, so then somebody asked him, what about the guy in Andhra? He says, he'll be praying that it curves further and goes into Odisha. I see. And what if it hits? Oh, we have a rule book for that. We open up our safe, we open, and it will say, call in the army. So that used to be disaster management, at some point of time. We have come a long way, and I'm sure we'll do much, much greater things if we learn the lessons. And as I would say, if we can have a history of what happened, archived well, and each of these sessions be more of a learning experience, and we take some lessons from here and put it down and work on it for our future plans, I'm sure we'll do better as we respond to disasters. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Commodore Antony, just to reassure you that when you spoke about embedded journalists, at my talk tomorrow, I'll be talking a little bit more about that, the media's role in disaster relief operations, and I have a couple of stories to tell of my own, and I also did get into similar trouble when I was here 20 years ago, but then everything was up in the air. We're a little time constrained, but we've just got a few minutes left for a short Q&A. If you could, if anyone wants to ask a question, please raise your hand, but I'll use my moderator's privilege to ask the first question. Air Commodore Krishna Kumar, what would happen in Car Nicobar now? And this is a question that anybody watching this will want to know. What would happen, God forbid, if a tsunami of similar intensity hit Car Nicobar now? I want to keep that question as specific as possible.
As you have introduced me, I'm a veteran now. But from what I've seen of the Air Force base now is the constructions are being kept away from the seashore at a safe distance. But there have been some plantations of casuarina trees. And if you know that these trees and the mangroves along the coastline, they take the brunt in case of a tsunami. If those things are grown well, I told you tomorrow when we go there we can make out. There's one thing which I want to in my lessons learned also wanted to re-emphasize. I'm very sure General Hasnain is here. Tsunami prone areas where the construction is supposed to be away from the there's a stipulated distance which is away from this beach line, shoreline. We should not, in the enthusiasm to develop that particular place or the establishment, we should not go into too close to the sea, because romancing with the sea is good, but when nature gets furious, then you become helpless. And the mangroves are real dampeners for tsunami. But I don't know, in peacetime, it means when there is no disaster, we tend to forget and lay less emphasis on growth of mangroves along the beach line, or the trees like casuarina trees, which can help us take this brand. Now coming back to Car Nicobar, there are drills being conducted, as I know of, last 2019, because I used to visit every year that unit, being the Commodore Commandant. They have stipulated drills in case of this earthquake or tsunami, what to do. And their families are not staying there right now, but I think there's a rethinking on that, so that life becomes a little more comfortable. But I'm very sure even if the families are there, they'll also be trained and taken through the exercise as to what to do in case of this tsunami. But if the tsunami comes, definitely it will create some amount of damage to the property, but I'm very sure we can save lives.
Commodore Benny Anthony, a similar question for you as far as Port Blair was concerned. In that slide that you showed us of how there was a tilt on the islands, and Port Blair, by sheer luck perhaps, or fate, turned out to be the fulcrum, so there was not much change there. What if things had been different? What kind of, how would that have affected things?
Well, see, every disaster, as you say, doesn't strike the same place twice. And every lesson you learn is also, different and iterative, so that you move along and learn newer lessons. If Port Blair was not the fulcrum, and if it was not, the subsidence was, let's say, 3 meters here, we would be in big trouble, because we wouldn't have any ships entering harbor or leaving harbor till the survey ships came in and surveyed the whole thing. Secondly, I would say, now that we know an earthquake means a tsunami, it is always better to sail out every operational ship out of harbor and ensure there is, the ships are out at sea, maybe a few miles off, so that they don't have this tsunami effect, and you have ready-made ships available to. But then 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whether you would be able to sail out ships, how many ships, etc. is a cause of, we have to see. We cannot have every ship ready. Like we had ships in the dry dock, they would be opened up, and water goes in, they would sink or turn turtle as it is, because you would have sides cut open for repairs, etc., and you cannot do anything in 20 or 30 minutes. So, in effect, 30-minute time, I think it's only for people, and whatever operational or ready ships or helicopters, whatever is there to take off and, carry out operations and get your communications going to every island. Now that it is it's a tri-service command, it was a tri-service command, but we were still getting into communications and how things happen. For example, like where Krishna Kumar mentioned, he told Chennai to tell air headquarters. Technically, it should have been to us in Port Blair. Luckily, there were other aircraft which, I'm not doing anything. In the heat of the moment, you do think what you think is best. Air headquarters would then go on and do all that. But that is how now we have so much of jointmanship. I don't think there's any doubt as to when something happens, who will be informed and how it will happen in the sequence of events. So I would only say that it's a new experience every time. However much we can prepare to our best abilities, seeing certain future possibilities. But how it will turn out next time, I wouldn't be able to say.
So we're out of time, but I didn't want to be selfish, so if there's time for one question from the audience, if anyone wants to ask, otherwise I will, yeah, okay, just one question. I'm taking the liberty to extend by just a couple of minutes too.
Good morning, sir. From Lima 52. So as we spoke about handling 2004 tsunami. So based on those experience and considering current scenarios with the technology that we have, what do you think are the better measures that we can have to be better prepared for or any disaster as a measure of pre-crisis management?
Yes, that's a very broad question. I think he has spoken some of the lessons learned. I did not say much about lessons learned. But we have to have SOPs. We have to have mitigation factors, mitigation activities which we need to do beforehand, so that when it hits, whether it is stores which are kept for disaster relief, whether it is equipment which are meant specifically for, and communication. I would say communication is of most importance, not only between the defense forces, also between all the islands and all the civil structure. If there is communication, half your problem is solved. You know exactly what is required. You know what is required to be given. Because when a ship goes from here with rice and blankets, and they say, oh, we have already got enough of it. We need milk powder and baby food and water. So just putting one, so that makes the whole thing. So communication is key, and I think in present day we are much better off with communications and the net and etc. So I think that we are way ahead presently. But preparation, I think in disaster management, I think the first is preparation, then response, and then so preparation. I think that's what I would say.
Commander Krishna, you just want to quickly add to that last word.
2 points from my side. One is about contacting Chennai. Like, Commodore Benny has said that we should have ideally contacted Port Blair, rightly so, right? But in the helicopter, there's a pre-tuned channels of the high frequency sets. So one of them was Chennai, and we didn't have a pre-tuned channel for Port Blair. So that's why, and that time the activities were so intense in the cockpit that we had no time for anything. And this the co-pilot took on his own initiative. I must name him again, Flying Officer Vijay. He is the founder of MyGate Security Systems today. He's a very enterprising guy. But it was his initiative, and he told me, I told him, okay, quickly contact any of the air bases. So we had a tuned in Chennai channel, already tuned in. And in a very garbled kind of communication, we could pass to Chennai. So that one. Second thing is another lesson learned. Once again, I request General Hasnain to take note of this, sir. Post-trauma counseling is one area which we never think of. All of us were absolutely, our lives were derailed. Air Force was very kind enough to give us posting to transfer to our native places, wherever Air Force station was available. But professional counseling by psychologists is very essential to get you back on track. Even for small children, you might think that they are not affected, but they are in fact mostly affected. They may not express it so, because if you don't do that, you lose that individual to the society, because he is no more he or she is no more useful to the society. And this is one aspect we must ensure, because immediate actions everyone does, saving lives, etc., and then giving a little bit of help and all. But what he's gone or she has gone through in his mind, and it is going to completely redefine his or her life for the future. So we need to correct and get them back on the track by a professional, counselor. That is one area which we had ignored, and many of the individuals suffered in the subsequent years of their lives because of that. Thank you.
If I may just add 30 seconds, ANC will not be able to speak for itself, but I can certify that Headquarters Andaman and Nicobar Command is the only armed forces organization where when the NDMA conducts mock exercises, this is the only headquarters which exercises itself. We just saw it happen 3 months ago, where even the families within the headquarters Andaman and Nicobar Command were being exercised on evacuation and things like that. So I think we've gone a long way since then. Now the last point on psychosocials are very, very correct, absolutely. During the COVID pandemic, we opened a couple of lines in the NDMA itself on psychosocial counseling. In Silkyara Tunnel, all the 41 workers were were counseled psychosocially through a telephone line which was put through the pipes, which went in. This is an aspect receiving tremendous attention today in all aspects of disaster management.
Thank you very much, General Hasnain, for that reassurance, as also to the other points that were raised by Commodore Krishna Kumar and Commodore Anthony. That brings this session to a close. I think this one was important because having two veterans who at that time were at the forefront of witnessing and responding to this enormous crisis was necessary to set the stage. This is the what happened. The sessions that follow will be what next, and I look forward to them. Thank you very much, sirs. Thank you very much. Big hand for them. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers and moderator. May I now request you to kindly take your seats in the audience, please. Car Nicobar was one of the areas worst affected by the tsunami, where, in addition to the civilian population, there was large-scale devastation and loss of life of service personnel and their families. One such story is of Miss Meghna Rajshekhar, daughter of late Wing Commander P.V. Rajshekhar, who lost her parents in the tsunami and has survived not just the tsunami but also many challenges in life, symbolizing her resilience. May I call upon stage Miss Meghna Rajshekhar to share her inspiring story of courage and resilience.
Good morning to one and all here. It's my third time in the Andamans this year, and I wasn't expecting myself to be here so soon, but clearly destiny has its own plans. I'd spent most of this year either in or around the sea, or recovering from injuries that came as souvenirs from my choices. From getting stung by one of the most venomous creatures on the planet, which happens to be a box jellyfish in the south of Maharashtra, to getting grazed by a sperm whale's tail in Mauritius, or diving at a very volcanic barren island multiple times 2 days after having a sink broken on my foot, or getting my GoPro stolen by an octopus, a very smart one. In the waters of Neil Island, I have had my fair share of eccentric times in 2024. The downtime, though, has only left me seeking for more blue. I don't know how to change my slide. Oh. That's me. I obviously wasn't this enthusiastic about the blue and open seas, although I did find comfort in swimming pools, which were safe. I would now like to digress from the present to the past and share a story of fear and full circles. In 2018, an unforeseen sickness with fatal consequences got me to quit my job and sit in stillness thinking about what to do next. There began a quest for a man who was faceless and nameless, long forgotten. As time passed, the headhunt for this faceless man set me on a much deeper path which I continue to explore till date. In December 2018, with the help of a family friend, retired Group Captain G.G. Rao, and the then station commander of Karnikobar, Group Captain Buller, this faceless man was identified as a Mr. Fasil, an aboriginal fisherman from Kakana, a village that shares borders with the Air Force Station Karnikobar. Mr. Fasil the first time on the 29th of December 2004, after having spent close to 4 days by myself. Giant waves swallowed me and the world I knew. And this incident happened on the 26th of December 2004. The whole incident was one single small term which was completely unheard of. It was called the tsunami, which also happened to be my introduction to the sea because I'd never touched the sea before that. 12 years old, I was lost and inhaled by the horizon, taken by the sea. I spent the whole day drowning, drifting, getting beat up. Most of the times I didn't have anything to hold on to. Briefly, I found my own room door in the middle of the sea somewhere in the afternoon. And close to after 20 hours, I was tossed on a shore on a super moon night. It was a full moon. And I spent 3 days walking on the beach in search of food, water, anyone or anything. On occasions, there were flights flying over me, but nobody could spot me. I found a bride's suitcase, and I used all the clothes to make flags, so probably somebody could see me, but it didn't materialize for me. But there came a day where I was just walking on the beach and I saw a man on a cliff and I ran towards him. He helped me out of that beach where I was stuck and gave me food, water, and submitted me with the Air Force officials. The whole station was taken by the sea and only the runway was functional. Once the man submitted me, I unfortunately forgot his name and face. We never met again. I could never thank him. The islands and the sea became a better experience and a real big nightmare for me. I drowned myself in studies and trying to learn the ways of the world around me. A Fasil, my rescuer, became a phantom I spoke about and dreamt of but could never remember. 14 years later, I circled back to the islands, where I not only found the remnants of a very disorienting, dystopian world, but also a real resilient one that constantly adapts and evolves. Both nature and land rebuilt the place. This is from 2005. I have taken these pictures from the station, Air Force Station. This is a 60,000 ton gallon, my apologies, fuel tank which was tossed around. And this is something I saw similar in 2018-19 when I was revisiting, but I was very happy to see that nature was doing well for itself. This is the island that I saw, and I took this picture in 2018 when I was landing in Karnikobar 14 years later. And it filled me with a lot of hope. This was the shoreline. It recreated itself. This is my rescuer, Mr. Fasil. I'm really proud of him. We had a great time together, and we are good friends. When I was arriving there, I asked station commander what I could bring for the islands, and all he said was bring some casuarina seeds. After having read up about it, I understood that they act as windbreakers and they protect shorelines. So those seeds were planted, and now there are 7K casuarina trees standing strong and protecting some part of the station. I spent 2 months bonding with my rescuer, learning fishing, spending time with his family, connecting with the officials and tribals, asking them questions about their survival and recovery. I also happened to fail a tsunami drill very miserably, and I decided that I should not be like that, so helpless, and I started venturing into the sea. I did it sick, I did it scared, but I did it anyway. I also happened to find my childhood chef, who was trained by my mother, and I never got to eat my mother's food. So after meeting Mr. Kali in 2018-19 in Car Nicobar and having my mother's food again, I decided that I must also learn it. So I cook for myself. Now, sometimes for semblance to prevail, it's important to look for a lost key rather than just finding it. So it was important for me to search for my family and neighbors, even though it was 14 years apart from the incident. Initially, I thought I should swim towards the horizon, which stopped making sense very quickly. Next, I found myself a mask and snorkel and decided to look under only to see the shapes and projections of my own fears. Yet I did it repeatedly, hoping that someday I'd be able to see what really exists under. Once I bid farewell to Nicobars in February 2019, in Andamans I discovered scuba and decided to challenge myself a little more. In the process of getting my first certification in diving, I got lost underwater twice, and I also nearly drowned to death once. I did it scared and I did it overwhelmed very much, but I did it anyway. After half a dozen harrowing incidents, I got a hang of it, and then underwater I now find myself absolutely hypnotized by a very dynamic realm full of technicolor and unthinkable life forms. As a consequence of my surrender to raw nature, I believe my untreatable sickness healed and never recurred. The sea, they say, once it casts its spell, holds one in its net of wonder forever. And I cannot agree more. Ever since my first scuba certification, I have come back annually once or twice to Andamans to work on my relationship with the sea and understand her better. These islands have not just become a playground for rich experiences and learning, but also closure and relatability. After having spent almost all my life on surface in the world of water, I now stand as a kite surfer, a long-distance swimmer, a rescue diver, and can free dive up to 30 meters in one breath. My current static is 3 minutes 50 seconds. Next year, I resume my training in Indonesia. And I spent close proximity observing massive creatures like sea cows, sharks of various species, different species of whales, and playful dolphins, shy turtles, and extremely venomous snakes also, octopuses, countless colorful creatures and features that exist, and yet there's so much left to see. Each dive reveals something new about the vast liquid world that cradles our planet. Our planet is 70% water, a colossal womb that birthed all life as we know it. The sea, in its infinite wisdom, acts as both creator and destroyer, a delicate balance that has sustained life for millions of years. Therefore, it makes sense for us to appreciate and experience the sea and educate ourselves about this great mother. Global warming makes this fragile coralline islands very susceptible to natural disturbances and disasters. Coral reefs not only support diverse marine life, sustaining ecosystems that are critical to environmental balance and health, but also act as natural barriers protecting shorelines from erosions and impact of various storms and big waves. Removing corals for decorative purposes, which I see a lot, undermines their ecological significance and contributes to habitat destruction. I hope we all get to enjoy our brief time in this ecological heaven as consciously as possible and stay prepared for untimely situations that may arise. Coming to these islands has always been a cathartic experience for me, and I do look forward to finding myself in Nicobars again. Thank you for having me. My utmost respect and gratitude.
Ms. Meghna, your inspirational story, Fear and Full Circles, is not just a story of resilience, but of hope. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today, and we wish you all the very best for the future. May I now request the moderator and speakers of session 1, along with Ms. Meghna, to kindly come on stage. I now request Commander-in-Chief, Andaman and Nicobar Command, to kindly come on stage and felicitate the speakers and moderator. Air Commodore B.S. Krishna Kumar Kirti Chakra. Commodore Benny Anthony. Shri Shivarur. Ms. Meghna Rajshekhar. Thank you, sir. We have come to the end of the first session. I now request you all to kindly take your seats in the audience.
Can we just, I want to end up, I think, a small token from the NDA.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I would now request all senior officers, guests, distinguished speakers to proceed for high tea through the exit to your left. I would request everyone to be seated by 1120 for the second session. Thank you.